Okay, we basically finished, for practical purpose, tefillin. The next thing we'll learn about, which is important really for everybody, especially people that have kids or want to have kids or will have kids. And that is the obligation of educating a child. Now there's a rabbinic mitzvah, some people say it's biblical, but the halacha is there's a rabbinic mitzvah for a father to educate his children. Some people ask, is that obligation only for sons or daughters, but the Alter Rebbe holds clearly that it's for sons and daughters. So the father has a rabbinic obligation to educate their children. We'll see exactly what that means. Now that applies also to other people, that they're not allowed to give a child something that's not kosher. But we'll see that. Whether it's a biblical mitzvah, rabbinic mitzvah, based on the education of the child. This is based on a pasuk that Shlomo Melech says, "Chanech lenar al pi darkei," educate a child on his level. Gam ki yasken lo yosem mimano, that even when they get old, they'll never leave it. So it's very important from the youngest of ages that a father has an obligation to educate his child. Now, even though that's the obligation, and women are not obligated in the midst of chinuch, even though there are opinions that say yes. In fact, there's a Rashi, a famous Rashi, beginning of Masechtas Chagiga. Rashi says that the father and mother are obligated to educate the child. And everybody discusses where does Rashi get that from. But the bottom line is the halacha is that it's an obligation on the father. But nevertheless, as the Rebbe said many times, because the mother is the one that's home, so practically speaking, she does more of the practical education, even though it's not her obligation, but it's still, she's practically more involved with the raising of the kids, so she has to know, so to speak, how to raise a kid. There's a famous story they tell that a woman was pregnant, she was expecting a baby, and she came to her OBGYN, and she said, "At what age do I start educating the child?" So the doctor said to her, "How old are you?" She said, 26. He said, "You're already 26 years too late." Because in order to educate a child, you first need to educate yourself. Then you know what to educate a child with. So therefore, like it says like this. See, this, in time of halacha, says, don't do this at home, you'll end up in jail. But Shlomo Melech says, the famous pasuk, "Spare the rod, spoil the child." So in halacha it says, if a child doesn't listen, you're supposed to hit them lightly, not abusive, God forbid, but you're supposed to hit them in a way that they, with a stick or something else. But it says you shouldn't be a fool. You hit them like achzorius, with meanness, just to get out your frustrations. So he says you have to teach children, especially, it's interesting, from the youngest of ages, you have to teach children not to lie. They shouldn't lie, and they should only speak divrei emes. They should only speak truth. Okay. Now the question is like this: the pasuk, and also to make sure they don't swear. Kids always, I swear. You have to make sure they don't do that. And this obligation, by the way, of making sure kids speak truth and not lying, and making sure that they don't swear. Shulchan Aruch says it's an obligation on the parents and the teachers, because both are educating the child. Now what happens, they discuss, what happens if the guy says on a great-grandfather, he says, "It's my grandfather." So then, as halacha says, it's not a lie, because he bring down from Poskin, somebody who was the 6th generation from the Ramban, and he still called him my grandfather. But by the way, I don't know why he doesn't bring it down, but Rashi says in Chumash about Yisrei, the 7 names that Yisrei had, so they came to Reuel Avihem, and even though Reuel, according to one opinion, was a grandfather, so Rashi in Yisrei says children don't hesitate to call a grandfather father. So then it's not actually lying. But it's very important to teach the kids that they shouldn't lie. These are fundamental things it says in halacha from the youngest of ages. Okay, now, once he reaches the age of positive mitzvahs, Now, the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch says, what does that mean? Every kid, based on his own intelligence, his maturity, for that particular mitzvah. In other words, at a certain age, he also says, if a kid understands Shabbos, then he's obligated to hear Kiddush and Havdalah, and that's in positive mitzvahs. Education in negative mitzvahs, again, when a kid is old enough to understand, you can't eat that because it's not kosher, then the father has an obligation to tell him you're not allowed to eat it because it's not kosher. Now, even if a kid is not that age yet, even a baby, so to speak, not the father and nobody is allowed to give them with their hands something not kosher. In other words, the only question is like this. If a 3-year-old kid, let's say, is eating something not kosher, and let's say he understands already that, let's say he does understand a little bit. So, nobody is allowed to give him something not kosher. Not the parents, not the stranger, nobody. You can't give him anything non-kosher. But what happens if a kid on his own is taking something not kosher? So the truth is, as far as an obligation, the father has an obligation to stop the child from eating it. Other people don't have an obligation to stop him because they're not obligated to teach the child, and he's doing it on their own. To feed him directly that they're not allowed to do. But the father in that case would be obligated to stop the kid. Or if a father sees a kid is doing something wrong on Shabbos, so then the father has an obligation to stop. Now, practically speaking, in today's world, if somebody else has influence on the kid and to tell him not to do it, they should. But as far as obligation goes, the obligation is only in a time when the father has an obligation to stop his kid from sinning.
What's with the Master of Challah with little kids? How long should we wait? Like 2-year-olds?
Okay, we'll get into that later. Between meat and milk.
Not like you don't have a bottle after they had meat.
So between meat and milk, because milk and meat is much easier.
Yeah.
Between meat and milk, a kid up to 2 has to wait an hour.
So you're not
Some poskim write if a kid even over 2 is desperate or whatever, they could wait an hour. They have to wait. Yeah. But again, he can't. A father wouldn't be able to give a kid. Let's say a kid ate meat, okay, and somebody wants to give 10 minutes later the kid wants a bottle. Yeah, so nobody's allowed to give that kid to the bottle because within an hour. But if the kid took the bottle himself, then the father has an obligation to stop him. Technically, nobody else does. The mother should also stop him. But the halachic obligation is only on the father in that case. So you wouldn't have to. Also, you have to educate kids when they come to shul. In kids of Shulchan Aruch, even big Shulchan Aruch for sure, should answer Amen and all the other things. Now the Gemara says, as soon as a kid answers Amen, he has a place in Olam Haba. And he says, from the time the kid says Amen, he has a chelik in Olam Haba. And you have to educate children that they should stand and shul respectfully. But those that run around and disturb, you should not bring them to shul. That's what it says in halacha, it says in Shulchan Aruch. So no, it's a very important thing. Kids need to be taught how to be respectful in shul. It's a holy place, it's God's home, and it's not a playground. And they really should answer Amen. And I'm not saying a kid runs around, shouldn't bring them to shul, but you should try to make sure that they don't run around at least too much, and they answer Amen and not too wild. I always give people an example when people bring kids to shul and they're running around, they're making a lot of noise, and I say to them, let me ask you a question. If you were in an important business meeting with your biggest client, and you had your kids were running around, there were a bunch of other kids were running around in the office where you're in the middle of the appointment, what would you do? You wouldn't let them run around because you're in the middle of your most important appointment, right? What would you do? Either, whatever, let's leave it out what you do, it's your imagination. So why is davening? People are trying to daven. It's their very important meeting with the boss himself, to ask for everything. So you understand, just because kids are running around, that doesn't mean, especially if it's somebody else's kids, like why they're disturbing people from davening. It's not appropriate, it's not right, it's not... but again, people should bring kids to shul, and they should be taught how to be respectful, that's all. Okay, now...
Zoom changed all that.
Zoom changed all that.
You should see some of the meetings I've had with dogs and kids running around.
Yeah, but you know what? People can't concentrate like that, and it's not... People come to shul to daven. I mean, it's not... Again, I'm not saying, kids are the future of the Jewish people, but they have to be taught from young age on, because otherwise, when they get older, they're not going to stay in shul and daven anyway. They're going to run around. If not running around literally like little kids do, they'll stand in the back and talk around. What? What?
I don't know if it helps and adds to the halacha component of it, but the Shah also says it.
Shalah? Shalah is halacha also, by the way. Shalah is a halacha sefer. So, this is from before the Shalah yet. It's the Magen Avraham, and it's even Shulchan Aruch itself. It says you have to be careful with that. Okay, now, even somebody who is not the father of the child, we just said before, you're not allowed to give him something that's forbidden to eat, even according to most opinions, even if it's only rabbinically forbidden. Not mamish, biblically forbidden food. You can't give him anything. You're not allowed to even... okay, now if the kid is sick, let's say, not deathly ill is a different story. If the kid is sick and they need to eat something not kosher, I'm not talking about medication, but something like mamish not kosher. So then you can give it through a non-Jew if it's only rabbinically forbidden. And there's food which is biblically forbidden and the kid is not dangerously ill, so they're not allowed to eat it, so then you're not allowed to give it even through a non-Jew. If it's rabbinic, so something forbidden only rabbinically, like chicken and meat and milk or whatever it is, so then you could give it to them through a guy. Now here's another interesting thing. What happens if something is permissible, but the time does not allow them to eat it? So then, there's no mitzvah of chinuch you can even give it. I'll give you an example. Once Shabbos begins, you're not allowed to eat or drink. Adults, over by mitzvah, not allowed to eat or drink. Once, for a woman when she lights candles, or a man from sundown, okay? Or a man in the morning after they daven shachris, Shabbos morning. That's the way we hold. Some people hold even before that. But after shachris, you're not allowed to eat or drink anything until you make kiddush. Not water, not nothing. But now the question is, can I give a kid something to eat before kiddush? So Shulchan Aruch Rebbe brings this down also. You're allowed to give a kid something which is permissible, but the time doesn't allow it. I'll give you another example. A kid needs to eat on Yom Kippur. 5-year-old, 6-year-old kid needs to eat on Yom Kippur, right? Are you allowed to give it's forbidden? You're not allowed to give him something biblically forbidden but the food is kosher. It's just the time is not allowing it to be eaten. Chametz is an exception to this rule. So then the din is you're allowed to give kids, even biyodam, you can give them to eat or drink before Kiddush, and if they're eating or drinking before Kiddush, the father doesn't have an obligation to stop them.